Hi, everybody. I'm Karl Kapp, and I do a conversation with. And today, I'm really excited to have two groups that are really doing some groundbreaking, innovative, and necessary work. So I'm going to start with Benny Levy. I'm going to, Benny, ask you to introduce yourself, and then tell us a little bit about this thing called the iLookout project.
So I'm Benjamin Levi. I'm at the Penn State College of Medicine. I'm a philosopher by training, and I focus on human decision-making, and I'm also a general pediatrician. And I help lead a team of remarkable people who have put together a thing called the iLookout project. And the iLookout project is at its base intended to help protect children and promote their well-being. And so what we've done is we've developed sort of what we call our core training, which provides mandated reporter training about what are signs and symptoms of child abuse, how to identify them, what to do when you have concerns, how do you gauge your concerns, and how can you actually take action to help protect children. What is perhaps different about this is that we, in partnering with Karl Kapp, we have developed a program that uses a video-based storyline and that is gamified, that is intended to help our learners take an experiential approach to learning through a story that they navigate. And then because one of the things we know is that however good an intervention is, it's only as good as its lasting power. We've created additional interventions that use microlearning. These are brief 5 to 12 minute segments that involve interactive exercises, gamification, to both reinforce and also augment the training we've done, and to really branch into other topics beyond just child abuse that are really relevant to child well-being. Things like trauma-informed care, things like how do we promote resilience in children? How do we help identify and support families that are struggling with substance use disorders? And one of the things that's challenging about this is that these can be heavy topics. And so we don't want to be like the adults in Peanuts, wah, 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 wah. We want to have people have a real learning experience. And so one of the things we've done is we've happily been able to partner with people like Karl and people like Marguerite and Shannon at Game Theory to help us really make sure that we're breathing life into these learning exercises so that we're treating people like adults who bring something to the table, but also people who want to learn, but do so in an engaging way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it's so interesting. Part of the project was working with Penn State and working with their theater folks and creating a script and filming and all that kind of stuff. So it's really innovative way to reach, as you said, a very heavy topic. And one of the other ways is through creating interactive games that folks can play at different times to really gain knowledge. And so we're very excited to have Marguerite and Shannon with us from a company called Game Theory. So if you could tell us a little bit about, what is Game Theory and maybe even how it started and then how you got involved. And then a little later, we'll talk about some of the actual games that you've created for it.
Yeah, totally. I'm happy to start. So Game Theory is a company that I originally started when I was still in college for game design. So I started it when I was a junior. And when we first started, we were very focused on just creating traditional entertainment games, right? We were in school to be game developers. We were like, great, we're going to make some super fun games. And that was like a really enjoyable experience. We learned a lot, but as I was running a company that just made games in the way that you would sort of traditionally think about them, I noticed this thing kept happening where I would mention to people who weren't involved with games that, yeah, I have a game company. And they would say, that's so fascinating. I'm so intrigued by games. I could never be a gamer, but boy, does that sound interesting. And it really made me realize that there are so many things that games do extremely well that many, many people feel like they would love to access, but can't, right? There's this sort of distance between those things. So we pivoted the company to become Game Theory and to really focus on building bridges between people who have really valuable, important learning objectives and mission statements and connect them with the tool sets that games provide, which at the end of the day, all a game is about teaching you something new and then asking you to apply that learning, right? Like if you break it down to its most basic pieces, that's what Tetris is, right? You're learning a system and then you're applying what you learned. And so they're really, really good teaching tools. They're able to teach because they sort of invite you in and meet you where you are instead of demanding things of you. They offer to instead provide something to you. So people are able to come to a learning experience, which might be something that you're normally maybe a little hesitant about, with a little bit of a more excited attitude, something that feels like it's going to really respect your time and provide you with that value back, right? So all of these benefits exist within games. And what we specialize in this company is working with partners who are trying to achieve these really great, important missions, like Benny's team with the iLookout project, and say, okay, if this is your learning objective, if this is the type of behavior that you want to be able to build within someone, how can we create a game experience that complements that learning material, works with it, allows it to flourish and thrive, and also creates an engaging, fun time for somebody while they're being exposed to it. Something we talk about a lot is how the way that you can build games for learning that really are effective and really mesh with the material is not tricking people into learning with games. A lot of people sort of like assume that's what you're doing, like, oh, it's a magic act, right? Like if you hit the game wand on it, then suddenly it'll be fun and it will all be perfect. And what it's actually oftentimes doing is understanding where the innate fun and excitement is with a topic. Because as human beings, we actually really love to learn new things. It's very rewarding, it's very satisfying. But oftentimes that process of learning a new skill, applying new knowledge, can get convoluted and sticky with the ways that we sort of force our brains to take in new information. So if you can take that really satisfying learning experience, like understanding how to evaluate a situation with other human beings and assess it for risk, that can be something that's really satisfying to learn about, something that's a really rewarding skill to build. And so us at Game Theory really focus on working with our partners to understand what their needs are uniquely and fully, and then build out a game that's going to fully complement and bring to life all of the natural benefits and all of the natural advantages that come with their learning materials.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, Benny, go ahead.
Can I add just one quick thing, which is that I think one of the other things that game theory has made, all those things are, I agree, are true. One of the other parts that has made them such a great partner with us is that integral to what we're doing is research. So we need to know both whether something is effective, but we want to be able to compare different approaches. And they're very open to designing games in such a way that we can get real measures so that we have an evidence base for what we do.
Totally. And that's all a little bit part of our iterative approach, which is sort of the way that we build games, which is something that isn't always applied to other fields, that I think has a lot of advantages when building games for these spaces. Shannon, do you want to just talk a little bit about what that means and how we work with our partners?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Shannon and my background's in project management. I'm so passionate about just bringing creative people from different fields together to see what we can come up with. And yeah, with our process, it really hones in on the magic that happens when we get all of those minds together in the same room. And also with the expectation that you're never going to get it right the first time, right? So whenever we build something, we start with something that's small that we can test right away. So we have something in our hands that we can see and get a feel for. So we don't, work months and months and months before looking at the game. As soon as we can, we get everyone in the room and we say, like, here's a small little game with some amount of reward. What do we think of this? How does this work based on your expertise and the people will be using this? And then we really listen to the feedback that we're getting on how we can make it better, and also how we can adapt the material and the game to fit with the material so it really meshes well. And it is an easy experience. And then we revise it. So with Agile, we're doing changes to the game every week even, and doing updates and polish. And it's really energizing to have everyone in that room and know that if there's a great idea, that we're able to act on that and be really opportunistic, and that we're not going to have to say like, oh no, not this time around. We really want to make sure that we get everyone's input in to get it right, so that we have that best case scenario for putting it forward. And then we, as Benny said, get to put it out in the world and kind of see the results from that collaborative process.
Yeah, that's fantastic, especially when you think about, as you said, having all these different ideas and different people in the room, maybe people that know games, people that don't know games, and putting them together, especially at a topic like this. So we've kind of talked a little bit, I think, abstractly, like, okay, we're going to cover this heavy topic, a child well-being. We're going to create a game. And some people might be saying, well, kind of what does that really look like? Like, how does that really work? So I was thinking, Benny, maybe you could talk about, kind of the game idea that you had and brought to game theory. And then Marguerite and Shannon can talk about, okay, then we took it from here and we kind of created this, maybe even show some screen captures here, not to catch you off guard, but I think it would be really helpful to help everybody kind of see what you're doing. So Benny, if you could kind of explain, like, what kind of problem or what kind of learning did you want to bring, and then how does that manifest itself?
So this is really a continuation of the work that we did with our core training, which you Karl, were integral with, as well as Andy Belzer, who used to be at Penn State in the theater department, is now down at University of Arizona, is the idea of using stories, because that's how we relate to the world. We have a story in mind, either in our own minds or what we've seen out there. And in part, what we're after is getting people not to have empathy, but to understand the experience that someone else has.
So very interesting. Not to have empathy. Some people might say, well, why not? Why not have empathy?
Well, it's not that we don't want people to have. It's not that we don't want people to have empathy, but that's
right.
The goal is not to be empathic towards them, but to understand and sort of immerse yourself into the scenario. Because if you can relate to somebody else, then you both, I think, start to take more seriously who they are and what their experience is. But I'm a physician, so I care about my patients, but I also cause people pain. I do a whole range of things. So I need to understand and care about them. But if my goal is to be empathic towards them, then I lose some of the clinical objectivity that I need. And people who are, it's one thing if it's your grandchild or your son or your niece or what have you. But if you're a part of a child's community and one of your goals is to really look out for a child's well-being, I think there has to be a certain amount of distance that allows you to take that observational stance. And so we want people deep enough in a story that they feel like they feel it, that they understand it. But the goal is for them to understand it, to be able to sort of parse out what's happening and know what to do. So we chose various scenarios that, people may or may not have experience with. A single dad with a 3-year-old daughter that he's raising who has autism. So there are challenges with behavior. And if you can't understand the challenges of having a 3-year-old child who's got autism, you may be misinterpreting things. We have another scenario with a family that are refugees from a war-torn country who are dealing with, past trauma, and they're in a new culture. And if you've never had that experience, we want you to understand enough about it that you're trying to be understanding. So your goal of being empathic, but it's not just about relating to them. It's about figuring out what's going on. How do I help? When do I need to draw boundaries to say, wow, okay, yeah, not only is this different from my lived experience, but I need to do something, or I need to make sure that a child is safe. Does that
help? No, that's very helpful. So you brought this problem about child wellness, taking the story of different kids in a daycare setting and what is potential abuse and not potential abuse. And the kind of fun thing with that was there's a couple red herrings in there that may or may not be require further investigation. Because it is a very delicate subject that people are dealing with. And so then you took that idea and came to game theory and said, okay, we have this concept of these kids and we want to try to make it help build understanding through game experiences. And so Marguerite,
can I just add one piece?
Yes,
so one of the things we did, and you know this because you were an author on the paper, is we did a cognitive map so that we identified what are our key learning objectives, what are our sub-learning objectives, where are they going to be addressed in our script? Where do we and how do we want to reinforce them? So we came to game theory with concepts of things that we wanted our learners to come away with. And we said, here are not specific scenarios that we have in mind, but this is the kind of interaction we're looking for. And then what Marguerite and Shannon have done is helped us operationalize that, which I'll talk about in a second, to make them sort of come alive. It's like taking something that's a script and making it into real animation that people can see move as they flip the pages.
And so went to game theory and said, here's our concept. We're not quite sure how to make this into a game, but that's your expertise. And, can you kind of guide us in the right direction? So what happened then, Marguerite and Shannon?
It's really, really great when we're able to work with partners who have a very clear research-driven, like, these are the goals we want to accomplish, right? Because then we're able to look at those goals and say, okay, great, here are ideas for how we can build this into the structure that you're working within. So for this particular project, we were able to talk to the team about these really great goals of immersing someone in an experience where they're having to make choices and they're having to understand a certain amount of nuance, right? Which games are actually a really great tool for. So we proposed building a series of games that ask you to sort of step into the shoes of someone who's having to do this tricky decision making and digging into these layers that these stories often have, right? And really understanding and being able to pull apart the different components. And when you're in a game, you're able to empower someone to do that through choices, through giving them agency in terms of what do they act on, what do they want to explore more, what boxes do they want to open, which do they want to close, right? All of those sorts of ideas. So for the games we're building, we're really breaking out a series of different games that are able to allow a learner to explore in an active sort of conversation way where you take an action and the game presents you with new choices. It's a much more active process than a passive process, right? Oftentimes, if you're watching a video, for example, or just reading an article or reading a book about a topic, that's a little bit more passive in that it is just giving you a set piece and your actions or your behaviors don't impact the way that that comes to you. But in a game, you're able to have that sort of back and forth dialogue with the game. And that's got the benefit of mirroring the real world immersion, right, that someone has when they're being faced with these challenging choices in these tricky situations. But it also has the benefit of feeling a little bit more engaging, right? Because it is that back and forth, it is that dialogue. It's not just you having to consume something that is being delivered to you. It becomes something that grows and changes over time. So we designed out, collaborating with the iLookout team, a series of games that sort of, we have these 3 different families that all have nuances and things you wouldn't expect and things that are going to be surprising to learn. And all along the way, you're going to be asking yourself, how am I best providing for the child's safety in this situation, right? And so there's a number of different games that sort of challenge you to think about the scenarios in different ways with different interactions. And then by the end of the experience, you will have moved through sort of what it would look like to gain as much insight as you can into these 3 stories. So it's sort of just like an interactive story that comes to life in a whole bunch of different ways that asks the viewer to sort of bring it to life along with us.
We're trying to promote critical thinking.
Yeah.
Because one of the real challenges, especially with something like child abuse, is that it's easy to jump to conclusions, to work with assumptions that are not questions. And what game theory has been very helpful at is helping us flesh out sort of how we get people to think, to see something. We don't want to trick them, but we want to allow them to sort of, work with their normal assumptions and then get them to question some of those assumptions so that they're thinking more critically about what they're seeing and what they're deciding to do.
And by immersing somebody in the situation and then giving them, clues or indications or behaviors that they can track and think about. Because one of the things, Benny, that you talk a lot about is, where's the threshold when somebody decides to report or not report? A lot of the folks who are going to be receiving this training are mandated reporters. And so they have to report. And so there's always a feeling of, well, should I report or should I not report? Or what's going to happen if I do report? And so I'm thinking that the game can kind of put somebody in that mindset and help them think a little more clearly about when to report because of the behaviors that they're practicing in the environment. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, I think very much so. And this is, this is directly from your work, Karl, as well, is that we want to give people a safe environment to practice applying what they learned and to make mistakes, because we learn from our mistakes. And so one of the things that Shannon and Marguerite have done is helped us develop several storylines, and you have to do at least one, but you can come back and do another one and now take what you learned and reapply it, because we know that it's through spaced repetition, spaced retrieval, that people, as people practice, they get better, right? Anyone who's learned to play an instrument knows that. And so what we need to do is to make that repetition interesting and different enough that it both reinforces what they're learning, but it's still a new experience, because most people don't want to do scales all day long.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. And also, most people, I think, are in a position of wanting to know the right answer. So I think one of the challenges probably that Marguerite and Shannon have is, how do I have a game that has, gray in it? It's not always very clear exactly what's happening. So how do you, Marguerite and Shannon, can you tackle that a little bit? How do you create this environment where the person is, things aren't as clear and they have to kind of figure things out for themselves?
I think a smart way that we've been able to collaborate with the iLookout team around this challenge is breaking the story up into segments where you can sort of move through one focus point at a time. And when we move through that focus point, the goal of the game can be, well, let's just add depth to this, right? At this point, we might not be asking you, like, make a choice and it's right or wrong and there's terrible consequences, right? It can just be, let's work with each other to understand all the layers that are going on here, right? And then you're able to move someone through an experience where they're able to make more and more choices. And then part of it is also just the way you communicate and encourage people to be in an exploratory mindset, right? So the first time they move through an experience, we might be encouraging them to do what they think is best. But then when they conclude it, we can tell them, hey, you should just go back a little bit and see what would happen if you picked that other ending. Let's just explore together, right? Because that mindset of being excited to explore and discover the possibilities, and then us building the game to allow for different possibilities, makes it something where you get to learn in that exploratory space.
You as the player get to say, I don't know, right? Like, that's a really important piece where, even though it is a system and there's a way to get more information and to make those calls, we want people playing through it to be able to know when they don't have enough to act and to acknowledge those gray areas themselves. And sometimes the right answer is not to jump to any conclusions yet and to push for a little more. And I think that's been a really successful part of the collaboration.
Here. And the gamification is designed to be meaningful and to dovetail with what we're teaching. And it's, if we hadn't had that, if we'd had that experience all along, I might not value it as much as I do, but I've had other experiences with other vendors where they want to slap a game onto this. The game had no particular relevance to the subject matter. And I think that that's one of the things that's special about what game theory has been able to do, is they've created a gamification experience that is integrated with the content. It's not, Candy Crush with, child well-being. It's something that is actually meaningfully embedded in the activity.
So it's built from the ground up, purpose built for the behaviors and the thinking and the processes that are most valuable. And I think the other interesting thing about this, and it'll be fascinating when the research comes out, because as you said, this is a NIH funded grant process. And so there's a lot of interest in what is going to be the outcomes and what can be changed. And already iLookout has had some pretty impactful outcomes. Benny, do you want to talk about that real quickly?
Well, the background on this is that while mandated reporting, almost all mandated reporters in the US require training. To our knowledge, we are the only evidence-based program out there for mandated reporting. There are only 11 states that even do a pre and post test. And those pre and post tests are not validated. So they don't even know whether what they're measuring in the 11 states where they measure it, whether it's an accurate measurement. So what we've been able to show is that iLookout's core training significantly changes people's attitudes about reporting. and significantly improves their knowledge. We're finishing up a study in Maine, a 5-year NIH study that is looking to see if it actually changes the behavior of people. And we're always interested in these research questions. So one of the things we're also doing, we haven't mentioned it yet, but we're taking the core. So what I think Shannon and Marguerite are going to share is what we call our micro learning or advanced training. But we're also taking our core training and translating it into Spanish. And as you know, Karl, in our original core training, we used real actors. We used adults and children, and they were filmed at a child care facility. But we're actually creating an animated version of that, which is going to be in Spanish. And so we're creating both an English and a Spanish version. One of the things we want to know is the learning better, different, worse if you use animated characters versus real life characters? I mean, that's really fascinating. Sometimes we learn better when we get a little more distance, right? So it may be the case that having characters who are less realistic actually help us understand the situation better. And that's what we're always trying to do, is trying to learn, not just for our project, but for other projects that deal with what are called serious games. What are the better modalities for helping people grapple with these difficult issues and learn, and not only learn, but actually behave differently? Because it's knowledge and attitudes is nice, but behavior is what people experience in the world.
Yeah, and the thing I think is so fascinating is, I mean, there's been studies like Dwyer about he did a whole series on, actually at Penn State, about realistic hearts versus drawn hearts, and how that looked, and how realism versus what fidelity that you need. But the missing piece is the field study aspect, right? There's one thing to study something in a lab, a phenomenon in a lab, and even if it's a phenomenon like which is better animated or realistic, but to actually in the field where people have to every day, you're trying to help the child, but also the mother's coming to tonight, and you have to maybe confront them. Like, that's a lot different than, oh, you're in the lab, which one's more realistic, right? So I think the field study aspect of this is what's really exciting in terms of bringing that knowledge to the forefront of game design and game development.
And in that regard, one of the things that game theory is really helping us do is to operationalize not just the decision-making, but also the engagement. How do what are the better and worse ways to engage a parent or to engage colleagues when you have concerns? Because it's one thing to know what to do, it's a whole nother thing to actually do it.
Absolutely. So let's shift slightly and see what some of the game concepts and ideas look like, because people might be saying, well, I'm not quite sure, I understand, but I'm not quite sure what would that look like. So let's go ahead and I'll turn it over to Marguerite and Shannon.
Yeah, I'm happy to screen share, and we can just look at some concept art here. Just get this going.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, you can.
All right, so first I'll just show you some of the characters that we work on for the game. So sort of to the point about how we make this material sticky, a huge part for us is just creating characters that really bring the players into the experiences and really make you feel like you can relate to somebody and be engaged by the artwork. That's a huge component of what we do. It's also fascinating. There have been certain studies that have been done that if you can just add a little bit of emotional character to a learning subject, it will stick better. There was a really fun one that was done around pieces of the cell and how easily people remembered it. And the control was, okay, remember the pieces of the cell. And then the experiment was, what if we just drew some silly faces on the different pieces of the cell? And that made the knowledge stickier because you have a certain emotional reaction to the piece of content that you're trying to, retain. And so really thinking about how we can create character art that's going to be resonant and going to be something that sticks for the viewer, for the player, right, is important. So these are just some characters that we developed in collaboration with the iLookout team. These are some characters where we had characters for the English version of some of these animations, and then we had characters for the Spanish version. And this was a really cool process because we got to work directly with a partner of iLookout's as a cultural consultant to make sure that this was really going to feel like something that was applicable in different cultures, the specific redesigns of the characters we made. So that's been really exciting. And then you
Yeah,
can sort of,
that's so interesting how the characters can add so much, and then so you this is interesting. You picked an art style that is highly realistic, but still has kind of a cartoon feel. Can you explain a little bit about the decision making in that process?
yeah, totally. So a huge part of it is just there's certain art styles that I think are just going to bring you in more readily, make you feel like you're playing with something that's fun and polished and highly designed, right? And I think that, the artist that we work with for this particular case, she's great at making sure we can still create characters that are going to feel true to reality, but they have a level of shine, they have a level of sparkle and creativity that I think makes it feel, when you look at these versus, for example, drawings that we might do if we were doing like a textbook illustration, I think you feel more like you're playing a game a little bit. You know what I mean? And I think that just brings you into that space. We call it sort of like the imaginary circle in game design, where you are able to step into an experience and recognize like, oh, this is something that I'm able to explore. This is something that I'm able to be a little bit more playful with in the interest of exploring a topic that can be challenging, right? So I think that having that mix of highly polished art and something that's still true to the characters is key.
Yeah, I think something else to add to that too is that it's really interesting. A lot of character design is often about exaggeration, especially with expressions and expressiveness. It's all about how can you make the happy look like the most happy and make it instantly readable. Whereas again, with this project, it was much more about the gray spaces and getting that nuance. How can we pull it in and make it feel like a real expression that you might see, where you can feel some stress, but also some optimism? And I think that was definitely something we were thinking about with the level of detail we added. We wanted it to still read, but we wanted to be able to have enough features that we could play around with the expressions and make sure that we had the range that we needed for these really complex situations.
Design. Okay, if we're starting with art along these lines, how do we then, for this game, you sort of move through a comic book. So when we initially design it, we just sort of draw out what we want the comic book to feel like. And then we really start to design the individual sort of panels. And then when we bring these into the game, they'll feel animated and alive, which I can show you some more of in a second. But you can see how we sort of can start with a basic character, and then we can sort of apply this in situations that I think can really bring the learning materials to life in a way that feels really, really genuine and draws you in, right? Like this is just one page of the story, but I think that you can, even without the speech bubbles for the comic book, you can tell that there's something going on here, right? You can sort of feel a little bit of the scenario. And so it's really rewarding for us to be able to take the art that we have and then bring it into a bunch of this different learning material in a way that brings the story to life and makes it feel really engaging and exciting.
And it was very, this was all very intentional. So for example, this character we're looking at now, we had a lot of back and forth about sort of what kind of look we're wanting. This is supposed to be a young man who is in a stressful social situation, taking care of his 3-year-old daughter who has autism, who on one level in society may not have a lot of standing, but has his own sort of level of confidence and sort of street cred, so to speak. And so we want to demonstrate that in his look. And so there was a lot of back and forth about what the eyebrow should look like, what the jawline should look like, what the nose should look like. Should he be heavy? Should he be light? In terms of his, how stocky he was. What does that feel? So I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was all very intentional. And the feedback we got both from our team, but also from game theory really helped us capture at least what we had in mind.
So very purpose-driven character development right down to the physique, so that the messages and the content that's coming out could be very well interpreted. So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
And then I can show you a little bit of how it starts to come to life
Great.
in the game experience. Just screen share a new window here. So then when we have sort of the bits and pieces, we're able to then weave these together into the interactive game, where you're able to say, okay, which kid do you want to start working with? Whose story do you want to explore? you're able to learn some more. And this is still in development, so there's little bits and pieces missing. It's all going to be coming together over the next chunk of time here. And you're just able to click through and make choices, understand more details, but it all really starts to come to life when we bring those pieces together, and it creates that interactive story for people to be able to engage with.
And because people, our learners they're choosing which order they want to go in, it gives them a feel of not command exactly, but a sense of control over their learning. And I think that, in my experience and many people's, having some level of control within a structure for your learning makes most people, I think, you tell me, Karl, this is your area, but it makes people more receptive to the learning because people don't like being told. They like to explore.
Right. Having a sense of autonomy is definitely helpful from a learning perspective. Especially, it's interesting, the target audience is people that are working with children in various capacities. Sometimes it's a childcare worker, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a social worker. So lots of different types of individuals. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, but you want to give them the control to walk through the modules and see all that information. So really excited. So I think it's wonderful. I've been, blessed to be part of this really interesting project, and it just gets more and more interesting every time. So if somebody wanted to learn more about maybe iLookout and game theory, what were some places or locations that they could go to? They'll definitely be posted in the video, but also where are some places that they should look?
You guys go ahead.
So you can visit our website, which is gametheoryco.com. So gametheoryco.com. And there you can check out some of the other projects we've done. We've got a couple of fun little example games too. We have a small game that just explains how gerrymandering works in a 10-second puzzle game. That's actually going to be featured in some festivals over in London around civics game design in next month, I think. So there's a whole bunch of fun stuff to explore. We get to learn so many diverse things each year. It's one of the exciting things about what we do. So you can see the games we build for farming and agriculture, the games we build for civics education, the games we build around learning materials and job preparedness, like things for Benny's team and others. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and check us out there.
To say, for the iLookout project, you go to iLookout, iLookout project.org. And what you'll find there is a description of what we do. You'll find we have a puzzle game ourselves for helping people understand what kinds of bruising is concerning, things like on the ear, and what kinds of bruising is not, where kids tumble. You'll be able to read our research that we published. We have an interesting interactive map where you can actually, we surveyed all the online mandated reported trainings across the country in that's 49 states, and then we catalog them, and you can click to see, whether your state actually has this component of the training. There are 39 different kinds of components we looked at. It's an interactive map. You can see which states we're in. Right now, we're in Pennsylvania and Maine, and also a version of iLookout is available for Head Start programs all across the United States and U.S. territories. And if you're interested in bringing iLookout, any of our programs to your state, we actually have a little tab there that you can click about how you bring it to your state.
Great, fantastic. Well, this has been wonderful. Such great information, such a great project, and really excited to be a part of it and to be part of this team. So thank you, everyone.